Europe is once again under the shadow of a war that refuses to end. From the Black Sea to the Baltic, from the Arctic to the heart of the Mediterranean, tension spreads like frost over steel. But this time, the storm does not begin with tank columns or missile flashes over Kiev. It begins with words, sharp, calculated, and dangerous, from the Kremlin itself. Vladimir Putin, standing before the cameras in Moscow, warned that if the United States dares to supply Ukraine with long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles, it would mark, in his own words, a qualitatively new stage of escalation. He said such a move would tear apart what remains of Russia-US relations. The warning sounded like defiance, but inside the Kremlin, it betrayed something else: fear. Behind those statements lay intelligence leaks and new imagery, signs that Washington and NATO allies were quietly transferring extended-range missile systems into Ukrainian hands, weapons capable of striking deep into Russian territory. At the same time, Russian engineers had been racing to upgrade their own missile fleets. Analysts from Daily Express US and other Western outlets revealed that Moscow's newest cruise missiles were being fitted with maneuvering flight paths designed to twist and dip in midair to evade Patriot and NASAMS defenses. The Kremlin called these modifications a guarantee of parity. But for Western observers, they looked like desperation, an arms race driven by anxiety rather than confidence. In Russia's own media, commentators no longer spoke of a Cold War with the West. They called it openly a fiery one. The rhetoric burned hotter with every day, and the mood across Moscow's ministries turned grim. Yet as Putin doubled down, mocking NATO's credibility and insisting that Russia could not be intimidated, American reconnaissance planes began to appear more frequently over Eastern Europe. Long-range bombers tested communication channels in simulated missions. Tanker aircraft lingered over the Baltic corridor, a silent reminder of how far U.S. reach extends. To the Russian General Staff, it was clear. The United States was moving from defense to deterrence. Deterrence that could, at any moment, turn into a strike. Inside Kremlin war rooms, officers whispered of new American flight patterns that looked suspiciously like rehearsals for deep penetration raids. The fear was not invasion, but isolation, of being surrounded, outflanked, and humiliated in full view of the world. That is why, tonight, Moscow's silence feels heavier than usual. Putin's threats echo through Russian state media, but his generals know the truth. Once American air power is unleashed, once those long-range systems cross the border, no rhetoric will stop what follows. The stage is set. The skies above Europe are no longer empty. And the man who once vowed to challenge the West now finds himself staring into the roar of engines that he cannot control. The United States did not wait for another provocation. Within days of Putin's threat, the Pentagon quietly greenlit a new logistics chain stretching from Ramstein Air Base in Germany to undisclosed launch sites along Ukraine's eastern frontier. Satellite images revealed cargo transports offloading sealed containers, suspected to hold long-range missile components. Washington never confirmed it, but Kremlin analysts knew what it meant. The Tomahawk was coming. For Moscow, this was the nightmare they had sworn to prevent. Putin's advisors warned that even a limited deployment of these systems could put critical Russian bases within range. When reporters pressed him on the possibility, Putin's expression hardened. If such weapons are used, he said, it will be an escalation of a different kind, one that will not go unanswered. His words carried the same chill as the Arctic wind sweeping across the Kremlin walls. As this played out, Russian missile brigades across Belgorod and Kursk were placed on high alert. Technicians rolled out newly upgraded cruise missiles, prototypes rumored to carry reprogrammable guidance chips designed to twist through unpredictable trajectories mid-flight. State television showcased them as proof that Russia could pierce any Western defense, even the Patriot batteries guarding Ukraine's skies. But outside Russia, the mood was less triumphant. Western observers noted the upgrades looked rushed, their accuracy uncertain, their guidance software untested. Maneuvering to evade, one analyst wrote, also means maneuvering without precision. Yet Moscow pressed on, declaring that these new weapons would restore balance against NATO's expanding reach. Meanwhile, inside NATO headquarters, a different kind of operation unfolded. U.S. Air Force planners drew red lines across digital maps, marking potential Russian command centers that could be neutralized in minutes if the order was given. Long-range strike packages were rehearsed, pairing F-35 squadrons with B-2 bombers for synchronized low-visibility missions. Refueling aircraft orbited over the North Sea, and AWACS radar planes scanned every kilometer of Russian airspace from the borders of Estonia to the Black Sea. The coordination was so tight that, according to one official, if Moscow fired a single missile, the response could launch before it landed. But with each movement, the risk of miscalculation grew. Russian commentators warned that Washington's actions had already crossed the threshold of a fiery war, the phrase echoing across primetime broadcasts. Inside Russia, fear and pride fused into one volatile emotion. Citizens watched footage of American jets streaking over Allied territory and asked why their own forces were not responding. Putin mocked NATO's unity publicly, calling its promises a stage show. Yet behind closed doors, the tension was suffocating. Intelligence briefings arriving at his desk painted a grim picture. The United States had mobilized not for deterrence, but for readiness. The next misstep, one false radar reading, one nervous trigger, could ignite a confrontation the world is not prepared to contain. As the hours passed, the situation moved beyond diplomacy. Inside NATO command bunkers, the phrase strategic containment gave way to a colder term, pre-authorization. Washington's allies knew what that meant. If Russian missiles crossed another red line, tactical U.S. airstrikes could be unleashed without waiting for a summit, a vote, or another warning. Each plan on the table was designed to be fast, precise, and deniable. One targeted a cluster of air bases in Belgorod, another the command post at Kaliningrad. A third, classified even among senior officers, outlined limited strikes inside Russia's border to neutralize launch systems before they fired. No one wanted to say it aloud, but everyone knew what it signified. The threshold between proxy war and direct confrontation was now a single decision away. The Kremlin's response came not through press conferences, but through movement. Radar signatures showed S-400 and S-500 batteries redeploying toward the western frontier. Mobile launchers rolled across frozen highways under cover of darkness. Moscow called it routine readiness. Western analysts called it fear. Putin's own rhetoric grew sharper, even sarcastic. "We have heard of American precision," he told an audience of officers, "but perhaps they should first learn how to hit their own targets." Laughter filled the hall, but the unease was visible. In private, his generals warned that Russia's aging air defense network could not withstand sustained U.S. bombing runs. Some urged restraint. Others whispered that a single misfire could justify retaliation. And outside those guarded doors, Russians felt the tension in their bones. Social networks filled with talk of shelters, shortages, and the word nobody dared say, war. Across the Atlantic, Pentagon officials reviewed risk charts that glowed red from top to bottom. Diplomatic backlash, civilian escalation, nuclear threshold. Every line ended the same way. Danger of miscalculation, high. But even as the warnings multiplied, preparations continued. Recon flights mapped potential entry corridors for stealth bombers. Naval destroyers in the Baltic adjusted launch angles for Tomahawk cruise missiles. NATO ministers called it containment through readiness, but the message to Moscow was unmistakable. If Russian aggression intensified, the United States would strike first and strike decisively. In this uneasy silence, both powers now stare across a frontier drawn not on maps, but in the sky itself. Will the United States authorize strikes deep into Russian territory? Will Putin gamble on escalation to prove his defiance? No one can say. What is certain is that the machinery is already turning. The radars locked, the bombers fueled, the orders drafted. One miscalculated launch, one misread signal, and the world could slide from tension to catastrophe in minutes. This is the moment when history holds its breath, when power teeters on the edge of madness. And inside the Kremlin, behind walls once thought unshakable, Vladimir Putin finally sees what he has feared all along. Not the collapse of Russia's enemies, but the unveiling of America's true airstrike power, silent, swift, and ready.